I'm doing fine, given the circumstances. Yeah, yeah. I'm, switching uh, states of mind and of spirit regarding, you know, all what happened so soon, so fast. Um, but there is a lot in the future, which is where Roger always lived. So he left a lot of things to complete, and we are working on that. So
Well, I can see. Well, you know that Professor Kaufman was a great man,
yes,
and I have the highest opinion about him. And I met him by coincidence in New York. I think he was born in New York, wasn't he?
no, he was born in Washington D.C.
Ah, yeah.
Um, and, but he was a constant traveler, and of course he loved New York. By the way, last time we were there, not so long ago, I remember going to some of his favorite waterfalls, and he was a very how would I say? He had a gift to stay in touch with everybody, with people, love restaurants, love humor and stories. And I still, when I go to my native Buenos Aires, I go to one traditional restaurant. It's like Elaine's, assume, in Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
The way I have to get a table fast is to say, I'm Roger's friend.
Well, actually, once
Yeah.
it is true what you're saying. You see, because once when I met him twice in New York, and some conference were being on organized by Professor Johan Roll at Meldega Evans College. I remember very well. And one day, Roya and Jan invited me for for dinner. And actually, I try not to eat too much, but that day I did not follow any rule. And I mean, well, the environment, the people, you see.
Yeah.
Well, this is the kind of thing that we do remember, and we shall remember forever.
Yeah.
It will
Yeah.
come with. That's very true. Well, this kind of interview is something that I've been doing, and I can tell you that Roya was scheduled for October the 7th.
Oh,
And, the first, we're also doing some webinars. And the first one was October the 11th. And I received an email from Roya, and he did apologize because he was not there. And he said to me, Roberto, I'm in hospital at the moment.
oh,
So
wow.
apart from being such a beautiful human being, you see, which I keep in the best memory of him, he was extremely polite, very, very polite indeed. And you see, and once I wrote to him and said, Professor Royer, or Royer, my dear friend, can I interview you? And he answered me, well, it is for you. The answer is yes. This is the kind of guy we're going to talk about. So you see, it is a great pleasure for me to know you and some other people related to Royer, because he was, he was a man that he worked very, very hard indeed. And he achieved so many things in his life. He has a beautiful family. I met Jan,
Oh, okay.
and you see, and we are very close friends as well. So life, my friend, we have to continue.
Sure.
And
Sure. Yeah.
at that webinar, when he said that he was in hospital, I was so shocked that I just tempted to stop it, the webinar. But I said, well, if I do this, Roya is not going to be very pleased with me. He will say you can't work. Don't use me as an excuse.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's going to say that. Well, the audience we have is really a large audience, and we have people in Asia, in Europe, in the USA, and in some other places as well. In Africa, we have a lot of friends there. And so all this interview is going to be seen there. And therefore, I would like to, well, having said that, what a pleasure to have you here, is please, could you introduce yourself? I've been reading about you. You have done a lot. And there is a book you wrote, which I think I'm going to get it. In Spanish, it's called Implementación de e-learning, metodología, herramientas y modelos. And it has widely been read and has a lot of citations or quotations, as I said. And so far is 120, which is quite a success. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. I actually, there are 5 books. Probably the most interesting, I would say, 2, is all of them in Spanish, and writing 3 books in English right now. One of them with one of my clients. But I recommend you regarding Roger's work, 2 that are Capital Intelectual.
Yes.
Full title, Creación de Valor en la Sociedad del Conocimiento. And the other one is Desempeño Humano, the first volume of the consulting manual. And in those 2 books, we put together a lot of things we wrote with Roger over the years in Spanish, because those were books we created, including the e-learning one, for a program that Roger and I created in Mexico, the Sonora Institute of Technology.
Yes.
And for the first PhD in performance improvement, societal performance improvement, where we graduated projects and companies rather than individuals. So we had to create an entire set of publications in Spanish, because there was nothing written down, and we had to write some new things about, for example, how we were developing intellectual capital applications in Latin America. So those are, if you are interested, also in the same wavelength, and they are part of what we did together with Roger.
Very lovely, yeah. And I have seen that some of your interests is a business economics, development economics, and a very hard word to pronounce, which is entrepreneurial economics.
Yeah.
Which is characterized by talking about finance risk and the hope of profits. Well, I don't know the pronunciation of that word. It's quite complicated. How do you pronounce that?
Entrepreneurial economics.
Entrepreneurial, yeah.
We called it, in management. Introducing myself, born and raised in Argentina, from Spanish parents and citizen of Spain, Argentina, and finally I moved to the United States in '98 and citizen since 2008, and live here in Chicago. But basically what we did in this entrepreneurial, we created with Roger this managers of social innovation program. And the idea was basically, we have a lot in MBAs that are about all companies, or if we want to call it in some way, geriatrics, management geriatrics,
yes.
How to revitalize a company like General Motors or General Electric. You have the Jack Welch and the people who, turn around almost moribund businesses. But there is very little written systematically about taking care of new companies. So entrepreneurial economics is about managing pediatrics as kids small new companies do a lot of work, wake you up at night, and usually have a problem sometimes containing themselves. So you have to take care of a nursery and how to grow companies from the early stage of kitchen table projects into full-fledged companies like Amazon or Mercado Libre in the case of some unicorns. So that's the area I've been working for the last 20 years.
20 years.
Both public sector and the private sector. So Roger, we define the companies or organizations, including cities and communities. We started working with companies, but we discovered soon that the companies themselves do not work in vitro. It's involved in a series of communities in countries, and their fate is not different from what they are in, and is as good as the good they can do to their primary stakeholders, who are, people living in the areas. So that's the way we started with Roger working back in 94, 95, northern Argentina.
In Argentina.
But I'm myself, just telling you something about that.
Tell me something, where were you born in Argentina? Because Argentina is a big country.
Yeah, but I'm a porteño, born in Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires.
Yeah. So
well, that's a wonderful place where to go, actually. I had just been at the airport, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's Buenos Aires and New York have a lot of things in common, particularly the high speed of people. And unfortunately, Buenos Aires took a different direction in terms of fortune, but it's still a very interesting city. Yeah.
It is actually, you see, once talking about my mother, who rests in peace, she went to Buenos Aires and she was delightfully. And something you see, my dear friend, I would like to learn before I pass away is how to dance tango. I have tried so many times, but I failed. Why is so difficult?
Well,
can you dance tango?
Yeah. I actually danced tango for a while when I was in Buenos Aires 20 years ago, and I dance sometimes with my American wife, but she studied tango here. And I dance tango because my grandparents danced tango. It's a kind of a tradition. Not everybody in my generation is a tango dancer. Most of my generation are not so keen on tango. Now, younger people are very frequently there. But it's a very difficult dance.
It is.
It is. And that's one of the reasons. It's like golf. You have a high entry level because steps are complicated. You have to have the right partner.
Yes.
And also, there, if you go back, I can suggest you some places to take lessons step by step and enjoy, because the problem is sometimes you have to remember that tango is basically about the embracing other person, and that requires feeling a new, having someone who's meaningful. But it's an entire work. Right?
Well, you see, yesterday, before we start with Roy, our friends, I think, well, actually, to me, he's still alive, and he will be always alive. So, okay, I'm going to talk in the positive way, and I do invite you to do just the same, and enjoy that we are talking about him. And I think, and I hope that he's listening to us, so I have to be very careful. Incidentally, yesterday I was talking to a friend in Pakistan, and he was talking to me about tango. You see, he is very fond of tango, and he want me, and this is very funny and strange. You see, he want me to go to Pakistan to teach him tango. And I said, well, my friend, I would like to go to Pakistan, but I don't think I can dance. And I mentioned that I was going to talk to you today, and I said, perhaps he can. So we have an invitation to go there.
that would be an interesting assignment, a variation from my regular.
Well, this is
that people are trying to call me to say, I'm sorry, but I'm doing a tango workshop.
well, about Roya, you see, what I found is that Roya was mainly devoted to knowing the legacy. This is the main aim of this interview, knowing the legacy of Professor Roy Kaufman. I'm sorry to read this, but I think I just wrote it down. Well, according to Wikipedia, I read Wikipedia actually among other sources, but Wikipedia is rather general. Nevertheless, sometimes there's something which is very good actually. And as far as Roya is concerned, Wikipedia is quite precise, and I think is very formal. And he said that in his fair approximation of Wikipedia, Roya was one of a great human being, he says so, and a distinguished member of the World Academy. Indicate that Professor Kaufman is an American figure in the history of education and technology and performance improvement fields, as well as strategic thinking and planning for public and private sectors organizations. He is currently referred to as the father of needs assessment. He developed the well-known mega planning model, a framework for adding measurable value to society. And this is very important. Back in 2014, the International Society for Improvement created the Roger Kaufman Award for social impact. Is there anything wrong about what I have read? I cannot hear you very well. Huh? Your voice is very low. It's low, still is low. Is there anything we can do to increase the volume? Now it's a better. It's actually very low. Your voice is almost gone. Yes, please. Yes, take your time, please. Now we're back, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Very well, indeed.
Okay, I'm going to take out the extra, and we are using now the other microphone. Okay.
Right. Please, well, perhaps, did you hear what I read about Roya?
Yes.
Well, please, the microphone is yours. And what would you like to add to tell us?
Yeah, I would like to add, basically, I think that what you mentioned is part of his legacy. Probably his most important contribution, besides of the concept of needs assessment, is the idea of mega planning, mega thinking, as he described. The idea that societal impact is the main source of guidance for developing communities, business, and organizational and individual performance. So if we want to achieve and create value, we have to start by looking into what kind of world we want to leave to our children's and the future, and then go back to what is our organization providing to that purpose, and then what is our team providing our organization, and finally, what are we supposed to do to get there, as opposed to going in the opposite direction. Roger with Peter Drucker, who was friend and colleague of the same generation of people, understood that doing good and doing well are not contradictory, but complementary and requirements. So a company that doesn't look for the well-being of its customers is usually doomed to fail. And one after another, from Enron to banking and other cases in 2008, you see companies that forgot that if their customers were damaged by their products or services, they will run out of business. So now, this was Roger started talking about this in 1969. In a famous article with Corrigan, he introduced this idea, and he was resisted for about 50 years as impractical, idealistic, unrealistic, philosophical, said in a bad sense of the term. And in these last 20 years, he kept finding that, of course, he was right all the way, and people started looking at Roger again. Today, it's obvious that people do not think in terms of denying social impact or social consequences, and companies started thinking about, corporate responsibility, corporate social responsibility, and producing goods and services that make a difference for people. Those ideas came into popular management literature. But at the time Roger started, that wasn't the case. And the Kaufman Center is dedicated to the idea that societal performance is a wider and more comprehensive framework to think in terms of how can we make things better for tomorrow.
Yes, that's very true. Huh? Tell me something. The day before yesterday, I was reading the newspaper and listened to the BBC One, and there is some kind of forecast for Latin America. And if Latin America doesn't do a good job very quickly, with reference to the 4.0 technological revolution, we're going to suffer a lot. What do you think about that?
Can you repeat your question, because I didn't hear quite well? Yeah.
Well, the thing is that according to some of the news I have heard from the BBC One, they mentioned that Latin America is in trouble because it has not been doing the right things. And therefore, what we need to do is to get involved in doing technological things according to the version 4.0 or 5.0. In other words, we had to do we had to advance our knowledge and application, and not just to export our mineral and that kind of things. Now, what do you think about Latin America and the future of Latin America from your point of view? What do you think about that?
Well, there are like two ways to think about the future of Latin America. When we wrote with Roger an article about societal performance, the idea of societal performance is thinking in terms of the end results, the gaps in results of different societies and communities. And when you look at Latin America, you find a big gap between the potential and the actual results, and also a large variation. The idea that it's not only that sometimes Latin American societies fall short from achieving their potential from making their potential actual, but also they are unstable. They vary a lot. We spoke with Roger about three main factors. One is societal capital is divided in like three areas: relational capital, the connections between people, the networks, the social networks, in which, in general, Latin American societies are good, culturally speaking. They have warm ties. They give very important role to the family, friends, and they have strong communities in that sense. Then you have the second dimension that is organizational. So the organizations they create to produce value. There you have a different situation. If you look at the doing business ranking of the World Bank, Latin American societies are usually from the middle to the bottom.
Yes.
Because they make very difficult for productive organizations to prosper. They still have a lot of barriers, a lot of problems from bad infrastructure, incorrect regulations, corruption, and close what we call chronic capitalism that make difficult for new companies to prosper. And finally, you have a third factor, which is institutional. And here, recent literature like Why Nations Fail, Acemoglu and Robinson, describe institutions like the rules. And in that sense, Latin American societies have real problems in having stable rules, playing by the rules. For example, Castañeda, former Minister of Mexico, author, wrote a book called Mariana Forever. And that book says that Latin American societies, Anglo-Saxon societies have flexible norms with inflexible application. And Latin American societies have inflexible norms with flexible application, which means that we have very good constitutions, but we don't follow them. And that creates incertitude. So that's my view, is that when we work in Latin America, we have to assume that the rules of the game may change during the game. The size of the goal will vary according to rules that we cannot predict. And organizations may fail to provide the services we are expecting. So what we have to live with that and think ways to solve it.
But in your view, do we still have a time to change and to adjust to what we need to do in the future? Because you see, my main concern has to do with young people. And young people need to live their life happy. No one came to this world to suffer.
Yeah.
So see, we had to make their life easier, but we had to ask them to work harder and harder. That's the only way to do things. Nevertheless, you see, we have to choose very, very accurate what kind of job they are going to choose in the future. what kind of study they are going to undertake, and that kind of thing. Which is your view about the young people, which is the main concern I have in my mind?
Well, I think that I'm very positive about. I think that Latin America is still a very set of very young societies. If you think about it, no country is older than, institutionally speaking, than 150 years. Some of them are even younger than that. And populations are very young. So young people are growing in different forms. I can see this. I'm familiar with Mexico, with Argentina, Colombia, Panama, and also some areas of Brazil. Less familiar with Chile, although it's a good example of a successful society in many ways. But I think the common rule is that the generation under 40 years is more entrepreneurial, better educated, and they have I would say, grow without some of the preconcepts that previous generations had that somehow hindered their ability to change, to experiment new things. So if you look at the unicorns in Latin America, most of the business owners are under 40. And this is a new generation with different criteria. So I'm very positive. We work with these people in the institute. One of the things that Roger had very peculiar, and that's one thing I was talking about, some people asking for kind of memories of Roger. So, well, the best memories of Roger is that he lived in the future. He was working with younger people, and he was challenging younger people. And we have all these things we can talk about. These are things that are happening right now. For example, we are working in Barrio 31, a slum in Buenos Aires, has been a slum for 70 years. And in the last 5 years, they have turned this slum into a neighborhood. In Colón, Panama, we work with Roger. In turning the city, we have gangs in the downtown of Colón. Colón is the city at the Atlantic gate of the Panama Canal. So you have Panama City on the Pacific, Colón in the Atlantic. And the city, the center of the city, fell into disrepair, and it was controlled by gangs. Well, we turned the gang members into tourist guides. And the basic reason was I went into some of these places where these people were carrying Uzis. I'm talking about people about 20, in their 20s. And I spoke with their wives. They were living in slums in the center of the city. And the wives said, well, of course we want to have regular jobs because our husbands made more money drug trafficking, but we want them to live longer than 26. So that's a powerful argument to show people how can they do it. And they did it. They are currently, I can show you later if you want some videos about what happened there. But basically they started to use their skills to work in tourism. As opposed to mad tourists, they started working as tourist guides, working in hospitality, doing, instead of living in alleys, they started organizing waste management in small companies. And so it's possible, I think, to find in the younger generation a fertile ground for the future.
Well, that's lovely. One thing I would like to, I don't want to disturb you too much, but if you had to say, or if you had to give some advice to the young people, well, what would you say to them? Because some people you see are optimistic. Nevertheless, some of the students we have are not very optimistic about the future. And this is something which is not very good. You see, it's like a break. If you start thinking that the future is not good enough, so perhaps you may not do what you have to do now. Uh, what, what do you think? What would be your advice to the very young students, people who just entered the university, for instance?
Yeah, one thing I would say is there was a very good advice that Henry Ford said once, that wherever you think that things are right or wrong, you're always right. Meaning our perceptions of reality create a reality in itself. If we think that we are going to fail, we are more likely to fail. One of the things that young people sometimes have is a lack of mentors, and also I see this over and over. I just had a meeting with a group of people working in projects right before you, and they are in their mid-30s. And one of the things that makes a difference is they want to have a job or a kind of work that is meaningful. And meaningful for the millennial generation is making a difference in the world. They are not interested just in making money per se or buying things, but they want to do something that they can feel proud of: independence, self-reliance, etc., etc. So all these are, by the way, independence, self-reliance, contribution, and having a full life, as you mentioned, which is very important, happiness and family life. These are all elements of Roger Kaufman's minimal ideal vision. The guiding star, he said, we have to start planning, looking at that. So are we going there, or we are not? So young people naturally look at that, and they are very, when they don't find that direction, when they don't see a connection between what they do and something more important, well, they don't feel that anymore.
Very true. Well, what I would like to do is, perhaps it's a bit too much, but I would like to interview you sometime in the near future, in a more with more specific point, if you like. And so, what do you think about that? May I try you once again in the near future?
Sure, sure. I will be happy to have an interview with you more specific on these topics. We can talk about the things that basically Roger worked with me in the Performance Improvement Institute and the Robert Kaufman Center. Yeah,
Yeah,
and we can go through the projects
that would be
that
wonderful.
are very, very interesting.
You see, on the other hand, I send you an email with some of the questions.
Yeah, I have it here. If you want
Yeah,
to
but
go there.
no, you see, the idea would be for you
Mm-hmm.
to think about what do you think it would be best for our people. And well, you know, I was training in England and in the USA, but I love this country, and I want the people to make progress. So you can help us, that would be absolutely wonderful. So please let me acknowledge you for your kindness and your friendship.
Sure.
And I really hope I'm going to write to you soon and to fix another date for another interview. And do me a favor and pass on to your wife, family, and beloved people my fondest regard and very best wishes. And thank
you so much.
very much. Indeed, you have been very, very polite indeed. Thank you, my dear Mariano.
My pleasure, Roberto. I'm at your disposition.
We're going to be in touch, my friend. Bye-bye. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good, stay blessed. Bye-bye.